twin brother's lies destroyed my life. My parents kicked me out. And now after years of neglect, they're asking for my money. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be betrayed by the one person who is supposed to understand you best? This is the story of a twin sister who faced betrayal from her own brother, endured the abandonment of her parents, and transformed herself into a beacon of hope and strength. The journey wasn't just about surviving the lies. It was about rising above them and creating a life that even those who wronged her could envy. Stay with me as I unravel a tale of pain, betrayal, self-discovery, and ultimate triumph. The story begins with a young girl named Emma, a 28-year-old woman with a twin brother named Liam. Growing up, Emma and Liam were always seen as two halves of the same coin. Yet their parents never truly saw Emma for who she was. The favoritism was evident from the start. Liam was the one they considered destined for greatness, while Emma, with her love for sports and socializing, was quickly labeled as the black sheep. No matter how hard Emma tried to impress her parents or make them proud, she was never quite enough. The disparity between how they treated their two children grew wider as the years passed. Emma watched as her brother received elaborate birthday parties, gifts, and constant praise. Meanwhile, her birthdays were mere afterthoughts, if they were acknowledged at all. It was her grandmother who made her feel special, the one family member who always remembered her favorite chocolates and slipped her a few dollars just to bring a smile to her face. The warmth of her grandmother's care contrasted sharply with the cold indifference of her parents. Emma knew early on that her home wasn't the safe haven it was supposed to be. As Emma and Liam entered their teenage years, things took a darker turn. Liam, perhaps out of jealousy or a desire to maintain his favored status, began spreading lies about Emma. He would accuse her of things she never did, and their parents, already predisposed to believe the worst about her, readily accepted his falsehoods. Emma's frustration grew as her parents constantly punished her for actions she never committed. She couldn't understand why her brother, who was supposed to be her closest ally, was so determined to ruin her life. The turning point came during their sophomore year of high school. Emma had downloaded Snapchat, just like any other teenager wanting to keep up with her friends. But her parents saw it as an act of rebellion, a violation of their strict rules. They stormed into her room, tearing it apart, ripping her door from its hinges, and declaring that she would no longer have any privacy. It was in that moment, with her belongings scattered across the floor and her parents screaming at her, that Emma realized just how alone she was. Liam stood by, not defending her, but smirking, enjoying her suffering. Emma's isolation deepened when Liam took his lies to their school. He fabricated stories about her being violent, even going so far as to injure himself to make his tales more convincing. He would show up at school with bruises and black eyes, claiming Emma had attacked him. The rumors spread like wildfire. Friends began to distance themselves. Teachers looked at her with suspicion, and even the principal called her in for a meeting. Emma thought, perhaps naively, that Liam would come clean when faced with the gravity of his lies. But instead, he doubled down, painting her as a bully and a threat. Her parents, of course, believed every word. They were so embarrassed by the accusations that they decided Emma could no longer stay in their house. They packed her belongings and sent her away to live with her grandmother. Leaving her home felt like a nightmare. Emma stood there, her heart breaking as her father threw her bags into the foyer. Her mother looking away, unable to meet her eyes. It was her grandmother who came to her rescue, the only person who had ever truly cared for her. She took Emma in, defended her fiercely, and promised that she would always have a place with her. Despite the heartbreak, there was a sense of relief in leaving behind the toxic environment that had suffocated her for so long. Living with her grandmother, Emma began to rebuild her life. She focused on her studies, determined to prove that she was more than the lies her brother had spread about her. She excelled academically, and when she went off to college, it was like a breath of fresh air. For the first time, she was free from her parents' constant criticism, free from Liam's jealousy, free to be herself. College was where Emma discovered her passion for writing. She started freelancing to make some extra money. And before long, she realized that she was actually good at it. Writing became her escape, her way of processing the pain of her past and turning it into something meaningful. Emma's freelance writing career took off. She worked with well-known companies, built a strong portfolio, and even started gaining recognition online. She never asked her parents for anything, not a single penny, and she took pride in her independence. Her work began to go viral, and she was invited to speak on television about her journey as a content creator. It was during one of these TV appearances that her parents finally took notice. After years of neglect, they reached out, not to apologize, but to ask for money. They wanted her to help them renovate their house, the same house they had kicked her out of without a second thought. Emma was furious. How could they expect her to help them after everything they had done to her? But instead of simply refusing, she decided to teach them a lesson. She told them she would consider helping, but only if they publicly acknowledged the way they had treated her. Her parents, of course, refused. Liam even messaged her, telling her to move on and accusing her of being selfish. But Emma stood her ground. She knew that she deserved better than the way they had treated her, and she wasn't about to let them manipulate her again. In a moment of courage, Emma wrote an email to her entire family, detailing everything she had endured, the favoritism, the lies, the emotional abuse. She wanted them to know the truth, to understand the pain they had caused her. The response was overwhelming. Relatives who had never known the full extent of what she had gone through reached out to apologize. They expressed their regret for not being there for her, for not seeing what was happening. Her parents, on the other hand, were furious, but Emma didn't care. For the first time, she felt free of their influence, free to live her life on her own terms. Today, Emma is thriving. Her writing career has flourished. She travels the world as a digital nomad, and she has built a life that she is proud of. She remains close to her grandmother, the one person who has always been there for her, and she continues to grow both personally and professionally. Emma's story is a reminder that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, it is possible to rise above, to create a life that is full of love, success, and happiness. Emma's story is one of transformation, from a girl who was constantly overlooked and mistreated, to a woman who took control of her own life and created her own happiness. It is a powerful reminder that no matter where you come from or what you've been through, you have the power to write your own story. I found a tampon in my husband's car and another in our bedroom. Our youngster suddenly got new clothes that I didn't buy, so I assumed he was cheating. There are moments in a marriage that make you question everything, those sudden shifts, those quiet doubts that creep up unexpectedly. It started as an ordinary day for Sarah, married to Tom for 7 years and mother to 2 beautiful children. Life, on the surface, was perfect. They laughed at each other's jokes, went on family picnics, and enjoyed a relationship that Tom often playfully described as still being in the honeymoon phase. But a seemingly insignificant discovery would soon plunge Sarah into an emotional whirlwind, where secrets, doubts, and reality intertwined in a way she never imagined. One Saturday morning, Sarah was buckling their youngest daughter into her car seat when something caught her eye, something pink peeking from between the seat cushions. Intrigued, she pulled it out and froze. It was a tampon. At first, it seemed like just a misplaced item, but the fact that Sarah had an IUD for a year, thus halting her periods, made this discovery perplexing. Sarah's first instinct was to confront Tom. She showed him the tampon, her face a mix of confusion and curiosity. He looked genuinely puzzled, shrugged, and mentioned that it might have been Fiona's, a colleague who had occasionally joined him on lunch runs. Fiona lived nearby, and Tom had given her rides before, which seemed to explain the tampon's presence. The explanation seemed plausible, but Sarah couldn't entirely silence her unease. Something about Tom's reaction felt off, too dismissive, almost like he wanted the matter dropped without a second thought. Weeks passed, and they even had dinner with Fiona and her husband. Sarah hoped the dinner would help soothe her suspicions, but it didn't. The way Tom casually avoided discussing the tampon, the lack of concern in his voice, all unsettled her further. She needed to test it somehow. During dinner, Sarah devised a plan and staged a fake emergency. She pretended to urgently need a tampon and asked Fiona if she carried one. Fiona handed her a tampon, one almost identical to the one Sarah had found. Sarah let out a sigh of relief, but only partially. Fiona's willingness to offer the tampon made it seem like there was no hidden agenda. But still, the unease lingered, nestled in the pit of her stomach, like a stone she couldn't quite swallow. A few more weeks passed, And just as Sarah thought her paranoia might finally fade away, she found another tampon, this time in her sock drawer. She stood there, holding it, her thoughts racing like wildfire. If the first one was easily dismissed as Fiona's, how could she explain this one? Why would a tampon be in her sock drawer? A place that Tom would rarely, if ever, have a reason to look into? The questions started piling up, forming a mountain of doubt that she could no longer ignore. Sarah felt physically sick at the idea of Tom having an affair. She feared confrontation, feared what it might do to her family if she was wrong. But she also couldn't dismiss the evidence mounting against him. Her sister was her confidant in all things. So Sarah finally decided to tell her everything: the tampon in the car, the staged incident at dinner, the new tampon in the sock drawer, and her gnawing suspicions about Tom's loyalty. Her sister listened patiently, and her face grew increasingly serious. She suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for Labor Day, a casual way to keep them in proximity without arousing suspicion. Unfortunately, Fiona and her husband already had plans for Labor Day. Instead, Sarah's sister proposed searching the house more thoroughly for any strange or out-of-place items. But nothing came up. They discussed setting up cameras. But Sarah hesitated. She was afraid of what she might discover, afraid of the truth staring her in the face. Sarah started watching Tom closely, searching for any changes in behavior, any new habits that might give him away. But Tom seemed the same as always, loving, attentive, and devoted to their children. It was almost enough to make her believe she was imagining things. Almost. But then, one day, her youngest daughter appeared in an outfit Sarah had never seen before, a pink onesie with snaps running down the front. Something Sarah never bought because she hated dealing with snaps during diaper changes. The onesie was paired with a little bow in her daughter's hair. Another item Sarah was certain she hadn't bought. Confused, she asked Tom if anyone had come by while she was at work. He denied it, telling her she was overthinking things. But the more he dismissed her concerns, the more certain Sarah became that something wasn't right. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Sarah finally set up hidden cameras. With the help of her sister and brother-in-law, they placed the cameras discreetly throughout the house, hoping that they would catch something, anything, that could explain what was happening. Sarah had almost resigned herself to more waiting when, one day at work, she received an alert from the camera at their front door. She opened the app, expecting to see a delivery person or perhaps a stray animal triggering the motion sensor. Instead, she saw a young woman, someone she didn't recognize, leading her youngest daughter by the hand into their home. Followed by Tom and their older daughter. Sarah's heart sank. She immediately called Tom, her hands shaking. He didn't answer. She called again, and again. On the fifth try, he finally picked up. She confronted him, demanding to know who the woman was. He tried to brush her off, but Sarah wouldn't let it go. Eventually, Tom admitted that the woman was his estranged sister, Emily. Sarah had never met Emily. She knew only bits and pieces about her, enough to know that Emily was troubled, had battled addiction, and had been estranged from the family for years. Tom explained that Emily had recently left rehab and wanted to reconnect. He had been meeting her secretly, bringing her to the house while Sarah was at work because he feared Sarah's reaction. He knew how Sarah felt about protecting their children, especially from people with troubled pasts. He hadn't wanted to risk her saying no. Sarah was furious. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the betrayal of trust. The fact that he had allowed Emily, a stranger to Sarah and someone with a complicated past, around their children without her knowledge or consent. The tampons, the clothing, the bow, they were all Emily's doing. Tom had allowed Emily to stay at their house, even sleep in their bed. During a business trip Sarah had taken, the tampons had been left behind, and Tom had been covering for Emily all along. Sarah felt an overwhelming mixture of anger, sadness, and disgust. It wasn't an affair, but it was still a betrayal. Tom had put their children at risk, had lied to her repeatedly, and had allowed his sister to manipulate their lives without Sarah's consent. When she confronted him about it, he continued to minimize her feelings, suggesting she was overreacting, that she needed to reassess her mental health. He gaslit her at every turn, making her feel like she was losing her mind, when all she wanted was to protect her children. Sarah knew she couldn't continue like this. She sought legal advice, preparing for the possibility of divorce. She started documenting everything, determined to protect her children from further deceit. She reached out to friends and family for support, refusing to let Tom continue to make her doubt herself. In the end, it wasn't about the tampons or the clothes or the bows. It was about trust, about the promises they had made to each other when they decided to build a life together. Tom had shattered that trust, and Sarah knew that no matter how much she loved him, she could never fully trust him again. And without trust, there was no foundation for their marriage. Sarah's story is a cautionary tale about the importance of honesty in a relationship. Secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of surfacing and causing more damage than the truth ever could. Tom thought he was protecting his sister and his marriage by keeping Emily's presence a secret. But all he did was drive a wedge between himself and the person he claimed to love the most. Sarah learned the hard way that sometimes love isn't enough, that trust and respect are just as important, if not more so. Sarah's story serves as a powerful reminder that in any relationship, honesty, communication, and respect must be at the core. Without them, even the strongest love can falter, leaving behind only the shattered remains of what once was.